Welcome, everybody, back here to Segal Talk at the Markney Segal Theater Center at the Graduate Center, CUNY, the City University of New York, here in the middle of Manhattan in Midtown, which is still empty. So many stores are leaving. I just yesterday went out and tried to get some electric supplies for a lamp. It closed overnight, the stores, and even so, there are lots of signs of recovery, especially here. We are still in a moment of uncertainty, and this is especially, of course, true for the performing arts in New York City. It's been devastating. Well, it has done to artists, many artists, spoken word artists, actors, directors, dancers, but also for musicians, especially. It's been no possibility to really perform. Yesterday we heard John from the Great Kaufman Music Center, what they did in the musical storefronts. I think it's an extraordinary activity that they put up. We heard from Bob Wilson last week, what he's planning out in Watermill and his work. And so I think it's time that we highlight what's being done now. Last year we were in the middle of the shock, the immediate aftermath of this, and we spoke to over 150 artists in 50 countries. And now it's the big question, was tun, what to do, what shall we do now? And there are many initiatives, and there are many great artists, curators, administrators, producers working. And with us today, we have one of the leaders in the field, we think the musician, and Mr. Pedja Muzijevic, and he is with us. So Pedja, first of all, thank you for taking out the time to be with us. Pedja has performed a virtual solo recitals for 92nd Street Y, Spoleto Festival in the USA, Maverick Concert in the Orchestra of St. Luke's, Bach Festival, the Schubert Club in St. Paul's, and concerts by Chopin and Mozart with Atlanta and Billing symphonies in this pandemic season. So Pedja is a musician, a very accomplished one, and our heart also reaches out for you guys. It's unimaginable how it means not to perform, how to rehearse for yourself. It's a devastating, and I once was last September or November on a concert on the street. A great band was playing, a salsa band, fantastic, brilliant musicians, and they said this is the biggest concert you see at the moment in New York City. And they were happy to be out there in their jackets, and so it's incredible. But Pedja, also in this contemporary art world where we live in, the phase, the moment after postmodernism in a way, he is a hybrid artist, and who not only defines his artist's work as being at the piano, creating scores and creating music. He also is an artistic administrator, an arts administrator, and he sees that as a significant part of his work. As Joseph Beuys in a way said, that the idea of the social sculpture, the structure, all work we do should be artistic, should follow artistic work, and it's especially true. And he's at the famous and significant Baryshnikov Art Center in New York, which has done so much for the community, and Baryshnikov has created something that I think really shines strongly in a way. He's also a collaborator of Bob Wilson, so he also felt, we should have a space where artists can show work, encourage, have residencies, and he put a lot of work behind it and also was able to raise funds, and we are truly grateful for him. But Pedja also is at the Tippett Rise Art Center in Montana, and we really want to know how he combines all these worlds and what he does in the time of Corona. He curates and produces also film shoots for dozens of musicians. I think he was just in Boston yesterday or like 2 days ago. And right now he says he's developing his cooking skills, and he's sharing it also online. So Pedja, welcome. Where are you at the moment?
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm in my apartment in New York City, in Chelsea, where I've been for most of the last year, which has been very interesting. It's usually my life consists of a lot of traveling, and I have to say it's been kind of a joy to be at home. It's been a bit of a guilty pleasure to be at home, but in the last 2 months or so, I've started traveling, and my first trip was actually to Montana. I played with Billing Symphony, and actually they had 20% of audience in the house. And that was amazing. It was like finding water in desert to go out, walk out on the stage and see people. It was beautiful. So, you know, we've all missed that. But I've been very lucky that I've been working constantly the whole pandemic, filming first very grassroots in my apartment, and then as the pandemic went on, both for my own work as a pianist and then my work at Bereshnikov Art Center and at Tip and Rise, we started to ask ourselves, how can we make this more creative and more really multidisciplinary, and really, you know, if we're asking you to watch something besides listening, what can we contribute in the visual way? Which is, interestingly, it has always been a great interest of mine. I do believe that concert is a multidisciplinary experience, because just like when you go to eat in a restaurant, before you had a bite, you walked in, you saw the design of the place, you saw the layout, you saw the lighting, you smelled something. And, you know, good 30% of your impression was already created before you even saw the menu. And I think the same thing happens in concert halls. So both Tip and Rise and Bereshnikov Art Center, in very different ways, are experiential in that sense that you really get a full, at Tip and Rise, it's a 12,000 acre ranch with huge sculptures, and at Bereshnikov Art Center, we are in the middle of Midtown. So we're very aware that you're coming from this bustling, you know, city, and how can we create a little oasis before you even heard anything. So we set out to go to artist studios, to museums, to interestingly designed houses and film musicians. And we really invited film directors to really leave their stamp on that music. I mean, I really encourage directors to tell us how they see this music and a musician and the space we're in. So it's been really, really fascinating.
That's quite something. Then put together, I think it was Gertrude Stein who said, more you see, the more you hear.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and both organizations, I'm so proud to say that we immediately said, what can we do now? What can we do now to provide paid work for the artists, and be it commissioning or presenting digitally or presenting archival things, and giving people space to work, and with these films also engaging film directors and directors of photography and audio engineers, because our entire community has been, as you well aware, so affected by this pandemic.
So tell us, what do you do? What does it really mean? What do you do at Baryshnikov and at Tippett? So tell us, what did you do with the projects and your ideas behind the vision?
Well, in both places, I'm involved on the programming side. Obviously, that's my strength is programming, and in the past that involved, you know, programming live concerts in front of audiences. And Tip and Rise is a summer season in Montana. We usually have 22 or 23 concerts over 5 or 6 weeks. And Bereshnikov Art Center is the opposite. We usually don't have a summer season, so it's a near the year. And Bereshnikov Art Center is an arts organization that has two kind of arms of operation. One is developing works, meaning giving artists space to rehearse with their collaborators without any obligation of performing, and without even any obligation to bring the work to fruition. It can be just something you want to explore. You need 2 weeks of studio time to explore something that you may decide was a terrible idea. And then we also present in all 3 disciplines, in music, dance, and theater. So, but interestingly, there are some striking similarities, even though these 2 organizations are not related. But they are very much passion of, in Bereshnikov Art Center case, of one person, of Mikhail Bereshnikov, and in Tip and Rise case of the founders, Peter and Kathy Halstead. So there's a very hands-on, almost hospitality, because it's this sense of like, well, this is our house, so welcome. Can I get you a drink, or do you need something? Where are you going to sit? So it's not kind of a large organization, and it's very intimate. And then the other thing that both organizations are passionate about is affordable ticket prices. So, you know, that art is really accessible to everybody. At Tip and Rise, it's $10, and at Bereshnikov Art Center is 25 and under, and often free. So I think there was a very conscious decision made that you know, while art should feel like a luxury product, it should not cost like a luxury product.
So what happened?
And then, of course, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I just want to say that, of course, the pandemic changed all this. So in case of Tip and Rise, we became a year-round presenter of these films and commissioning, and both organizations got it. Because the first thing where everything was shut down, we realized that the first thing one can do is create work. So at Berkshire Art Center, we set out with commissioned 8 artists right away to do work. And then the moment we were allowed to go into the space, we gave them space to go in and develop those works in our studios. And then, interestingly, we had this concert scheduled for a live performance in this season that was kind of centered about Fred Erzhevsky's work called Coming Together, which is a work for narrator and a group of instruments. And the text comes from an inmate in Attica prison who led the revolt against police brutality. And then, of course, with all the incredibly relevant social situation that we are in, and thinking and movements from Black Lives Matter to social justice, when we were shut down and, for public performances, we all decided that this has to happen. So it was the first thing we filmed in our space when we were allowed to go in. And it ended up being a co-presentation between Tip and Rise Art Center and Berkshire Art Center and 5 Borough Music Festival and Bay Chamber Concerts in Maine. Because we all felt that this was such an interesting and important work that, we wanted to share it with as many people as possible. And it was really fascinating because it was really baby steps of people trying to be together, to have 7 musicians in one room amongst these very strict regulations of, distancing and entering the building and cleaning the spaces and air filters. And it was really full of all sorts of emotions, the tenderness towards making music together again, and then fear, we didn't know. And then we also found and engaged a Pastor Isaac Smith, who was a former inmate, to be the filmmaker. So it was a really, really interesting project that both organizations participated in. So that was really kind of meaningful to me. So and then, of course, since then we've all started to do more filming, but at first it was all a real unknown.
What months was that when you did the first?
That was in September. Early
Yeah.
September.
Well,
Yeah.
And in September, each week or each month, you do create a film or video inside Berkshire?
Oh no. Well, no. There has been pretty much consistent activity at Berkshire Art Center as far as development of work, and we've been
Tell us a bit.
So we've been we've commissioned artists ranging from choreographers like Carl Marshall and Stephanie Baden-Bland and kind of media and sound artist Dave Blow, and so they've been creating works that we filmed, and then we are still in the process of presenting, interspersed with archival films that we've been releasing. And for instance, this week we just released a concert that we presented, I guess, a couple of years ago with the Tesla Quartet playing quartets by Szymanowski and Janacek, and Alexander Smithers singing Barrio Sequenza. That was kind of done in our sort of trademark salon/cabaret style and slightly staged. So there's been a fair amount of activity, but obviously, these are smaller projects because we really cannot easily have a rehearsal with 10 actors or 10 dancers. So it's been an interesting way to function creatively. But on the other hand, when you really think about it, all of us always function within limitations. Those limitations may be spatial or geographical or financial. So now just those limitations are a little tighter. So you think, okay, I have this much playground, I'm still going to play. So it's been interesting.
So, and you release it once a week, or do you have a
schedule? Well, it's been this year, it has been practically once a week of something, yeah. And on the Tip and Rise side, coincidentally, we are releasing this weekend, started this evening. We have a little 3-day festival when we will release 10 films that we filmed in New York in the fall and winter in 2 different locations, at the Mena Center and at Joel Shapiro Studio in Long Island City with his magnificent sculptures. And with great range of music from Richard Good reading poetry and playing music by Bach and Brahms, and also a Mozart sonata, to a world premiere by Bora Yoon, played by Claire Chase, to songs sung by Tyler Duncan and Erica Switzer, and violinist Tessa Lark, and then Ben Weilman and Gabe Cabezas playing a duo by Jesse Montgomery, and Ben also playing a partita by Chris Rogerson that he had commissioned. So these are our kind of first showing of these films that we've been making, and we will have a live conversation with some of the artists preceding these films at 7:30 Eastern time today, tomorrow, and Sunday. And then the films will remain available to watch at any time. And we've just started filming for the next batch of these films. And as I've said repeatedly now, when I watch a TV show or a film and I see the credits at the end and there are hundreds of people, now I know what they do. All of this takes a lot of coordination and a lot of things that I've really learned on the job, and it's been fascinating. And especially looking at this first batch of films, it's funny when I think, oh, we filmed 5 people in one day. That's crazy. So you learn things.
Yeah, it's quite stunning to think that what a live performance with bodies in a room, bodies who age at the same time, often, as some people point out, even the heartbeat synchronizes, but it's gone. It's never the same. It's an ephemeral experience.
Yeah.
Now, no people in the room, but it's filmed, put in a form, and maybe in 100 years from now, people will say, look what people did in New York in the time of the pandemic, and they can see it, they can hear it.
And it's interesting because I really felt that I not want to pretend that this was a concert. I felt like if we're making videos, then let's really go that direction and let's explore what can this art form do and how can we create a different experience that's actually that I can, with 2 feet on the ground, ask you to watch rather than just listen. So it's been a really, really interesting exploration of lighting design and haze machines and sculptors, and we're shooting at the Noguchi Museum next week, which I'm very excited about, which is such a beautiful space. And the Tibet Rise is a, as I said, 12,000 acre ranch, which is also a sculpture park and a music festival. So this marriage of visual art of all kinds, and particularly sculptures and music, was kind of a natural exploration for us to do, both at Noguchi Museum and hopefully at Storm King. So we're really exploring those connections, but then each one of those things is a rabbit hole of questions. The Storm King, there's not a really flat space on the grass. So how do you put 5 musicians to play? There are all these logistical questions, and where's the sun coming from, and how long it's going to be in the shade. All these things you never thought about.
The little waves of myelin, maybe far away.
Exactly. But it's all so fascinating, and I think in so many ways, especially classical music, was overdue for a shakeup of how we present something. The price certainly been high with this pandemic, but I think it's a great time to rethink how do we share what we want to share, this amazing art form that's been around and the new work that's created today. How do we share it with as many people as possible? And then, of course, the other obvious thing is, just like for your program, there's no more local presentation. Everything is global. But that also means that we are all, as consumers, we are overwhelmed with content. And every day, I feel like I could watch this, and I could watch National Theater, and I could watch this, and I could. So that also creates a bit of an overload. And how do you select what you watch? Which is an interesting marketing question. But on the flip side, you get emails from people from India and Israel and saying, I love that theater piece with Bershkova Center. We got an email from somebody from Israel, and we thought, but it was 4 a.m. there.
What are the numbers? Do you have statistics, if you wanted to?
Oh, I'm so bad with numbers. They range greatly. They range from hundreds to thousands, depending on the,
Many more
depending.
than normally reach in a concert in the
Yes,
percentage.
absolutely. Because both Berkshire Art Center and Tippett Rise are very intimate venues. I mean, our largest venue, our venues at Berkshire Art Center range from 60 to 220, and the Tippett Rise is 130 or so, and definitely more than double, and often much more than that. So that is, of course, very exciting.
Yeah, that is quite some, and you're going for it. Do you think it will be a radical change for Tippett or Baryshnikov, that experience, or do you think it's a break in between, it will go back, or do you feel this really changed what we are doing?
Yes, not change in a full change, but this will be an additional activity. There is no doubt that both of these organizations will continue providing digital content as we go back to live performance. Because I think we've both realized that A, it's another art form, and B, we can reach further. And so I think it's a really interesting way of sharing arts and making it more, democratically available to anybody at any time. And so yes, it's definitely within the missions of both organizations, I believe.
So how did you do it staff-wise? Did you retrain your staff, or people already knew enough? Or you hire outside? How do you do all the film work?
Well, personally, I've spent my lifetime with a major philosophy that not knowing something never stopped me from doing it. So I learned, I asked. I love to ask people, so I reached out to people. And as far as filming, I knew nothing. When I first, a person on my piano side, when everything got shut down, I was interestingly at Tippett Rise doing a recording session in March, recorded a kind of a Bach family album of music by Johann Sebastian, Carl Philipp, and Wilhelm Friedman Bach. And in this idyllic, 8 inches of snow, all white. At night, I was the only person on the ranch, which was kind of extraordinary for an urban dweller like me. And then, working with our amazing audio staff. And so I flew in. It was Sunday. I remember it was March 14th, I think. And I went to my favorite restaurant called Chiquito in Chelsea. And I said at the bar, they said, well, we're going to shut down tomorrow. And I was like, really? Like, this thing is really? So, in the next couple of days, everything shut down. Little by little, sort of few weeks by few weeks, all of my concerts got canceled. So my first next engagement was a recital at 92nd Street Y. And they asked me if I would film something. And I said no, because I had never owned a microphone in my life. My first camera I ever had was when I got my first iPhone. So it was not something that I was naturally interested in, or I know that I was actively not interested. It's just something I never did. But then as everything got canceled, once the whole summer got canceled, and that was within a week or so, everything just knocked up. It was like May was canceled, June was canceled. I realized that I had to do something or I would go completely crazy. So I called them back and I said, okay, I think I want to film something. So they said, okay. So then I asked people, what should I get? So I got this microphone. I learned that this inimitable New York fashion that while I looked at Amazon and they said that, I could get this mic delivered in 3 months because of course there was a huge, first of all, issues with transportation. And then, everybody wanted microphones and cameras. And somebody said to me, oh, H&H, which is this amazing electronics store in New York, they said that you can order online and then walk up and pick up through a window. It was like, illegal merchandise. So I did that and I walked up, they're 5-6 blocks from me. And it felt so kind of adventurous, and needless to say, I knew nothing what to do with this microphone, but I learned. And then I devised this program. I changed it slightly from what I was going to play in person. And then I thought, well, I'm not interested in just putting this iPhone camera in one spot. I want to play around with it. So I set out to experiment treating the camera as an audience member and basically picking up this very tripod that I'm speaking with you now on and saying, would you mind if I moved you to another seat? So I practiced this whole spiel while I was playing, and then I would speak about music I was playing, and then I would move the camera. And, you know, I filmed every day for about 15 days, the whole program. It was about an hour of music, because I was really interested in exploring, you know, what can this be with the most primitive equipment. I mean, iPhone and this microphone. And so that kind of put a germ, you know, put a bug in my head that to really explore. And once we got to more professional equipment and obviously actually hiring film directors who know what they're doing, I was really set out to really give them freedom and ask them, you know, what would you do? Here's the music. What would you do? So it's been really fascinating.
Incredible. So you became a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker of your own work, you're producer of your own video. Nothing you would have thought, you know, when you. I also think Baryshnikov, when he created, I don't know how he made it happen. Many people try to do things like this. Often it didn't work out. He did it, and
Yeah.
but you would not think that it would be close Corona time, but he would be producing a massive amount of videos that could be uploaded on screens to people. And such a radical change. We are so close to it. Maybe we don't even see what it means. What does it mean all to you? Do you feel your own software in your head, something that updated? Do you look at the world different? Is something happening in your mind, or is it a confirmation of what you said? I always try things out, so it's not. Or do you feel something is different?
You know, it's so interesting. In essence, it's the same exploration of a full experience of anything, whether it's a meal I cook for my friends, or it's a concert I play live, or it's a concert I play for camera, or I produce for camera, or I curate live. I always think of the full experience, and I am very interested in what does it mean besides just playing. So that's one answer. On the other hand, it's so interesting because this pandemic, in some ways, I'll try to formulate this not to annoy everybody, has done the last thing the first world needed, was to think even more about ourselves. You know, constantly checking what temperature this, because we're already on that road of kind of self-centeredness. I feel like this pandemic has pushed us all to be more or less alone, and not with many people, and then live in this constant fear of, like, or at least for a while, quite active fear, like, am I sick? Am I getting sick? Did I cough because I have allergies, or am I sick? And I just had this sort of annoyance, because I'm really not interested in thinking about myself, but of course thinking about others was actually challenging, because I wasn't around people, at least the beginning, and until we really started hiring people, which was fairly soon after, you know, the springtime. But still, you know, I realized how what gives my life fuel are other people. So that's one aspect. On the other side, concurrently, we have this, what to me is probably the most important socio-politically, culturally movement in decades, from Black Lives Matter to social justice and all that, which is the exact opposite of that. So it's such an interesting time to try to kind of figure out how can we connect these things, and how can we, and it's something I've always been so interested in. How can art be more relevant in everyday life and to everybody? How can we, and I always follow, or not always, but for a long time, I've followed the path that food has done in this country in the last 20 or 30 years. And how can we in the arts follow that path, that basically the level of food has risen in all economic structures. Basically, everybody wants to eat better. And it's not only connected to once a year you go to a fancy restaurant in a suit and tie. So I keep thinking, what can we do to create performing arts where that's just something on a Wednesday at 5:45, you call your friend and say, hey, let's see something. And that's not going to kill your pocket. It's going to be a great experience, and you'll want more. So all of that is kind of mixed in all this thinking. But of course, now the one thing we for the moment, we're making baby steps at the moment, but the actual having people in the same room it just proved to me what an essential part audience is in the performing arts, that it's a two-way street. So that was one I remember when that really done. I was so depressed. I thought, that's really the only thing I want to do, to be with people. But I think that this digital thing has reached people, and I think it'll be all the sweeter when we can be together.
Yeah, but it is, as you said, for the first, for our world, perhaps the first time we experience uncertainty. For others is now in Africa, where there's not even enough money for measles vaccinations. I think about 400 people die from malaria. Numbers constant, and we are not aware of it. We had, our friends from India, Abhishek, remember, who talked to us. He was looking out of the window, and 400,000 people would leave Delhi because of Corona. The houses didn't want them anymore, and they were on a march of them up to 800-900 kilometers, and they couldn't cross state lines. It's happening actually again. There's a photo in the Times today. So, and I think we experienced that, but also globally. And so do you think also America as a country, besides that, will we go? Is it the idea just to go back how it was, or do you feel also with the new government that is a moment of change? This is a moment, something is happening. What is your feeling? What do the artists you talk to? What is Baryshnikov? Where do you and Tippett? What's your feeling?
Well, I think that going back is not only physically but also intellectually not an option ever. Even though we may think sometimes that we go back to something, we always go forward. I do think that this is kind of a defining experience for us, because what I'm hoping it will result in is more humility, more empathy, and of course, arts are very much part of humility and empathy. There's nothing more humbling than being on stage. Doesn't matter who you are; anything can happen. So that's, and so I do think that there is. I think there is. Well, I can speak my experience. I think there is a renewed sense of community, of we are in this together, even though we are actually not together physically. I think there is, at least from what I see from artists I communicate with, and also friends I see with great regularity, actually for months now, there is this sense of we are in this together. And there is a text, I haven't seen you in 3 days, are you okay? Which, a year ago, just assumed that I was somewhere else. So there is something nice about that, I think. Again, the price is very high. But I'm hoping that it will focus us on more essential things than perhaps surfacey things, hopefully.
And within the world of music presenting, where you and also John, who was with us yesterday, are moving, is there a network emerging? Is there something where people talk? We had Olga Garay from Los Angeles, who was for the Cultural Commissioner, who's very much connected to Angeles, but also to the Latino, Cuban, in the South American movement. She said, we created a network. We feel we are afraid we will be shut out. What will happen? America gets all vaccinated and the borders go up. Nobody is allowed from the entire world till in 5 years from now, vaccinated. What will happen to global presenting? We're going to have Joe Melillo on here. Also, it will be interesting to hear from him there. But is your world, do you feel also there are some roots, rhizomes, or because there are some networks are emerging, or is it individual?
I think it really depends on people. I've always been lucky to have a real network of colleagues and friends, whether it's on the musicians side, as with my performing hat, or the arts administrator side. I think different people function differently. I'm a herd person. I love people and I love to be with people. So I do have a lot of friends who I speak with very regularly about all these issues, you know, where we are and how can we do better, and on every level, including on diversity level. And I think the international thing is very interesting, because now we're in a situation completely opposite than we thought we would be 6 months ago. 6 months ago, we thought that Europe is going to get vaccinated first. So I spent 3 weeks in Verbier Festival for a few summers now, you know, sort of, I mean, I can't say regularly, but I've been going there for some years. And their attitude was, well, we will all be vaccinated. Now it's the polar opposite. We are all vaccinated, but they're not. They're still going ahead. We had this amazing meeting of planning all these, you know, chalets for people who tested positive, those who have to quarantine from countries that have to quarantine. I mean, it's a military operation. But then, you know, you start to think, okay, can I plan right after I fly back from Switzerland that I can just play a concert next day? Because maybe I'll have to quarantine because I'm coming from a country that may not be vaccinated, because it's all changing all the time. So our previous mode of planning is completely challenged. So I have some performances in Spain in October, and I was supposed to go to Los Angeles directly from there. And I actually asked them to postpone it to April, because I was afraid that I don't know what's going to happen in Spain in October. So it's all these things that are quite challenging. But I think it's also, it could end up being the polar opposite of what I said earlier, which is happening now, that in digital presentation, there is no local, because everything is available wherever you are. And we may, when we make these baby steps, go really back to real local, because the traveling, especially international traveling, may be, you know, difficult for a while, which is, I think, not the worst thing. I think it's great to look around and say, who is my neighbor and what can you do? What can we do together? It's fine.
Yeah, that's quite a good point, that in one way it is really local, like the Kaufman Center said, we do this here, and not even someone from Brooklyn is going to come and walk by.
Right.
From
Right.
whom I was with. But on the other hand, someone, as you pointed out, in India and Sri Lanka and South Africa can watch it. And
yeah.
And anyway, there, you know, the carbon footprint of flying around, bringing over companies, orchestras, you know. So I think the thinking is changing a little bit. And you said, you know, checking the temperatures. We are now aware that, you know, our body temperatures go up, and it's a dangerous sign. The Earth's temperature goes up a couple of degrees, it might not survive, like a tree. You put a tree on, I've got a beautiful bonsai tree. I made a mistake. I had it on my heater, and they put on overnight the steam heat. It was dead the next morning. It was too hot. You know, it didn't survive. And these are the big changes, I think, as many people, Bruno, Tour and others, you know, to now they say this is maybe just a rehearsal of things to come. And even if this crisis behind us, others will come, and climate change is an important part. Do you feel that in your context, there is also an awareness that we all knew about it, but there's a bigger urgency to engage? And what are you guys going to do, if so, at Baryshnikov or Tippett? Are there plans, or do you?
Well, I think in both organizations, they are continuing plans, because as I said earlier, with our ticket prices, both at Baryshnikov Art Center, at Tippett Rise, we were already kind of on that path of trying to be as inclusive as possible. One thing that we were plotting at Tippett Rise, and I really hope it happens as soon as we can, we kind of plotted a little road trip with 3 musicians, and I was thinking string player, something very mobile and easy to set up, to do pop-up concerts in saloons, coffee shops, galleries, wherever, you know, in Montana, just to go to really small towns. And I went on a road trip to kind of scope out locations, and it was so wonderful. And it also shows how people are so willing. Everywhere we went, people were like, "You would just do that?" And I said, "Sure." And then it was so interesting, because then some had these kind of preconceived notions of where classical music should belong. So they would take me to like I remember this resort, they'd take me to this beautiful room where they would have like private parties or weddings or something. And I said, you know, I was kind of thinking your saloon they said they would play there. I said, absolutely. I mean, with the right program. And we're thinking like 15 or 20-minute programs. So that's something I would really love to do, simply to make more attempts to break those barriers of and preconceived conceptions of what classical music is. And British Conservative Center, we've done that a lot, as much as possible. I'm hoping to do kind of a street party in front of British Conservative Center this summer, to further kind of say hi to our neighbors as the weather gets nicer. So I think I absolutely, I mean, absolutely, they would, it's been at British Combat Center, because we do music, dance, and theater. Just by the nature of having 3 disciplines, there was such an amazing array of artists we've supported over the years. In classical music alone, it's a little harder to get that much diversity, but I think there's a real much needed effort, and also to look at the past. I mean, it's amazing how you have these situations where that the major works were premiered by Black artists in the 18th century, and we didn't know about it. It's like, how's that possible? Beethoven Kreutzer Sonata, really? Yeah. Nobody knew of Bridgewater. It's like, really? You have to white out that history. So I think it's so important to understand that didn't start today, and just to build on it more and more, which would be great.
How was your journey? When did you decide you wanted to get in the arts, and why are the arts important to you? Why do you dedicate your life to it?
I think so much early on, it wasn't that conscious. I was fascinated by music, but I didn't think of it as a profession in any way. I was too young to really think practically. But then, of course, as I was born in what is now Bosnia, and then it was Yugoslavia then. And then when I was 16, I went to Zagreb, which is in Croatia now, to continue my studies.
You played piano already? You took lessons? Or?
Yes. I played piano, though I didn't start that young. I started when I was 9. And I continued my education, and then I wanted to go somewhere else. And, I don't know how you end up in the United States, but sometimes these are, looking back, they're these kind of set of, not quite accidents, but like, I didn't know what I was doing. I went to audition at Curtis Institute. Frankly, the only thing I knew about it was it was all scholarship, because I had no money. So, it was kind of dumb luck. And then, I stayed here. I came to New York. I went to Juilliard. Quintessentially, broke musician, will do whatever I can to, make a living. But at the same time, I was always curious about everything. So whatever gig came my way, I took it. So at some point, and I went to competitions, and I got lucky here and there, and I was, playing concerts. But, as you well know, making a living in performing arts is not an easy proposition. And so my first foray in multidisciplinary collaborations was with Martha Clark. It was a co-commission between Lincoln Center and Netherlands Dance Theater, and I literally stumbled into it. I have this friend, Charlotte Hellekant, who's a wonderful Swedish mezzo, and Martha was interested in working with her. I was visiting her in Glimmerglass, where she was performing. We went out for breakfast, and she had a meeting with Martha, and I was sitting, in another booth in this diner. And at some point, Charlotte came to me and she said, well, it's kind of ridiculous. I told Martha that I have a friend who's in. Martha said, well, why don't you just join us? So I joined them, and they continued conversations about this piece, which was all kind of German expressionism. And I said to her, but did you look at early, Webern songs? And finally, at the end, she said to me, I will also need a pianist. Are you interested in being involved in this? So I said, sure. So I stumbled upon that. And then through a dancer named Rob Besser, I met Misha Baryshnikov. I went on a tour with him, and and then Misha said, "Oh, I want to build this art center," and I was like, "Oh, okay." So it's been an incredible. I now am of that age when people ask me for an advice, and my only advice is walk through any door that opens. You can always walk out. So I had this incredible luck of meeting these extraordinary people. And then, when the center opened, Misha had this idea that it would be a place of gathering of artists, of exploring and being together and multidisciplinary things. And he said we had two residents at we barely were open. And it was Benjamin Millepied and Azur Barton, two choreographers, developing two different works. And at first, our building was divided with 3 commercial theaters and us on 4 floors above. And there was a Hurly Burly was rehearsed down with Wallace Shawn and Parker Posey and Ethan Hawke. And at some point, Misha said to me, well, why don't you ask a musician friend or something to come and you do a little concert for all the dancers and we'll invite the actors downstairs. And I asked my friend Jennifer Frauchi, who's a wonderful violinist, and we did like 30 or 40 minutes. And then, everybody said it's such a great place for music. And I thought, well, I don't know. So then we ended up with this amazing relationship and sponsorship by Movado. And I went on this meeting. I had never held a job of any kind other than play the piano. I went to this meeting and I said, I have this idea to kind of recreate a 19th century salon where you would come in, you would pick up a glass of something, you would sit at these tables, be nice lighting, and there would be an hour-long concert. I hate intermissions. So for me, in ideal circumstances, I work, I go out at 6:30 or 7, I have a glass of something, I see or hear something for an hour, I go out for dinner, and I go home. That's my ideal evening. So I basically spelled this out, and they said, oh, that sounds great. We do work with this catering company. They did everything. I just kind of stood in disbelief that my dreams like that happened. So it was incredible. I felt like the luckiest boy alive. So we had this really, such an extraordinary opportunity to have really a carte blanche. I created what was to me an ideal concert. And so then, we've been at it for 15 years. And since then, we've done many other things and are true. And from the beginning, I was fascinated with lights. And from the beginning, we asked for every concert, we had a lighting designer. We started with the great Jennifer Tipton, and who did a lot of our concerts. And if not, she would send one of her students and she would say, this is great education for them. Very little rehearsal, just make it work. And so we would create these beautiful atmospheres. And again, I would give them carte blanche. I would send them the music and say, this is what it is. You create the atmosphere from the moment we walk into the space, how it feels then, what happens when the musicians go out. So it's been a really, really interesting. And then, we did some really, elaborate collaborations with true, theatrical presentations of music. And then, of course, all the other things in dance and theater, both in development and presentation. And then, I'm very bad with chronology. About 4 years ago, I was introduced to Peter and Kathy Halstead from Tip and Rise by my dear and unfortunately late friend Charlie Hamlin. And I went to play there, and I had never seen anything like it. You go to this, vast, when they call it big sky, they really mean big sky in Montana. And the first thing you see when you get closer to anything, you see this Alexander Calder sculpture. You're like, wow. And then, you have this absolutely perfect, but could not be simpler concert hall that seats 130 people. And 10 9-foot steinways on the property. So it's this incredible, it's a real feeling of being a guest in nature, with invading as little as possible, because these cottages are just incredibly organic to the land. They're wooden, these structures, and then these sculptures. And to have this really organic care about the whole experience of a concert. There's a restaurant, you can get food, you can go on a sculpture tour, you can go hike or bike, you can hear a concert, you can go as I guess last year was nil. 2 years ago, the last structure we built at Tip and Rise was Xylem, which is actually the picture where I'm photographed on your website for this conversation, which is this incredible structure, which was basically built for a place to just sit and listen to the sound of the brook, or look around, or speak with somebody. and it's all found wood from forest fires, and it was designed by Francis Carré, who's an amazing architect from Burkina Faso who lives in Berlin. So it's this really, it's the polar opposite of an urban environment, you know. You know, and as such, what's interesting to me, I think the actual concert and the way we intake the content is different. Here we come from this mad city that we love most of the time, and then we go into these kind of oases of culture or arts or whatever, and then, but it does take us a little while to get there. And this is, we presented a couple of years ago Corinna de Fonseca Wolheim's Beginner's Ear, which is a really, really interesting project in which she has a guided meditation for 20 minutes, and then you hear 30 minutes of music. And her premise is that we are most often not even ready to intake music when we go into a space. At Tippet Rise, the moment you enter the ranch, you are in a different state. So it's a really, really interesting, the whole experience is just fantastic. So I've been very lucky.
Yeah, no, this is also for our theater community is a big reminder that yeah, it does start when you cross, you know, the store and you get into a space. Like in Japanese tea houses, there's a little garden, and once you step over a stone, which even has a, I think it has a white painting in the middle, you are, and you go through the garden, you sit down, you take a shoe off, and then you go through a door that is very small. Originally to take your swords off, you wouldn't find, and then you would look at it. Often concerts or discussions, if important thing would take place, and I think this is something perhaps this Corona time also put back in our mind, that is this something of significance to slow down, to experience, and to be in the moment, and that's what art, and especially music, of course, are so great. But yes, we do so much, and we run. And if you go into a Broadway theater, it's the opposite of it. You know, it's like cattle drives. You go in and out, so it's missing. And I think, I don't know how, I don't miss that side so much, but I miss more of what you talk.
Yeah.
And of it. How, I asked John yesterday, that you're also an artist. And you're an arts administrator. And often, you know, the arts administration schools now, it's whether it's at Columbia and Berkeley, so many, you know, at Yale or whatever, and they become specialists. But you're an artist. How significant is the fact that you're an artist and you are in charge, and that you can make decisions?
You know, I think even more significant for both of those things, that I'm a performer and an administrator, is the fact that I've never stopped being a consumer. I love going to performances. And I think it is that side that has informed me more than anything, both as a performer, as an administrator. Like, you know, I go into performances and then you observe things that make sense or don't make sense. And you think, oh, I'm going to steal that. I like that. So I think that's the part. And I know John is the same way, John Glover. And I think that makes a huge difference. I think those who never stop being audience then try to figure out what would make it better. So that's really my impetus on both ends, both as a performer, questioning all the conventions of performance. Like I always, you know, the length of the concert, but also, why do we walk on and off stage all the time? I'm not exactly tired after 7 minutes. Maybe I don't have to walk off. Maybe I could chat a little, you know. So all those decisions that these conventions in classical music, I will never forget, because at Berkshire Center, our production staff is theatrical. And of course, at theater, it's a much tighter experience of the whole show. You do a real dress rehearsal in which, you know, there's curtain, you know, house to half, you know, that you do the whole thing. In music, we wing all that. Nobody ever speaks about what happens in between. So we had a string quartet and they played, you know, a short piece, like 5 minutes, and they bowed, people clapped, they bowed, then they walked off. And our production person ran to me, she said, "Is there something wrong?" And I realized how senseless that convention is. Like, where are they going? Why? So that's really what interests me in concert presentations, is to come sort of go down to the essence of what is really necessary to convey this amazing content that we have at our disposal, and what are just these kind of things we do without even thinking about them, whether they produce any effect or what. So I think that's that informs me both as an artist. Of course, in my own performance, I've certain freedoms in both sides. I don't like to invade artists' territory. If that's what they want to do, that's what I want to do. It, and nobody's going to get surprised. Our audience is used to that. But if somebody comes to me and says, I have this idea, I'm always say, okay, I'm all ears. Tell me, what would you like? And it's not always possible, but it's nice to, and that has been really, for instance, this Coming Together project that we co-presented. Katie Hyun, who is a wonderful violinist and who was actually in our Tip Advice program tonight of these films, she founded this ensemble called Quadlibet, which is kind of a collective of string players. And for the actual Erzhevsky piece Coming Together, she had this idea, because people were still spread out, to individually film, to have each musician film themselves in something that looked like a confinement cell. Of course, they all joked that they were like, we're freelance musicians. My apartment is a confinement cell. So, but they created this incredibly interesting video that was so meaningful with the work, that was basically a staged version of that work. So I think there's a lot of awareness. Once you open the door to a lot of artists, they will go through, and they really, there was so much thought put into all that. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think it is a significant sort of, what we want to say, appearance on stage, that institutions where artists are in charge, they create something, even in the time of Corona. This is what I see, and I would encourage all institutions also to say, put artists in charge, put them on the board in all diversity also, and really listen to them. It's not just lip service. Give them, trust them, and hire them, and give them the wheel. And I think it's working.
Yeah.
And it really shows who does something and who doesn't, who really wants to do something for the people, and it's not for their institution or for the artists themselves. But I think, as you said, there's a great awareness now that art has to be shared, and how meaningful it is. As you said, all these people who say, yeah, of course you can perform here. Would you really do it? So they're on both sides, and they say, yes, of course we would do it. And that it's not a commercial business, that it's not just a big machine that we have to feed, and that there's something more profound, human, and significant underlying. And the simplicity of, as you said, which we are forced now, perhaps we are a bit to face it.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting, it really forces us to ask ourselves, what is art, and what purpose does it serve in life? And I think that's such a meaningful question to ask ourselves all the time, because just demanding attention or funding or coverage in newspapers or something, to me, it's sort of childish. Tell me why. Like, we just assume that it's this sort of entitled thing, but it's not. I think there's, and we can blame education or this and that, doesn't really matter. We're in a situation where art has not touched everybody in our country or even in the world. So what is that bridge that we can build to say, hey, walk over, maybe there is something in it for you, even though you think, I've never heard of these people, I don't know who they are. So I think that's a really important quest.
Mm-hmm. And the question that you said, yeah, I want the people in the bar to hear, or that you say, the people outside, they are, and we always knew that, but something happens. I think Susan Feldman spoke about it at St. Anne's. She said, we couldn't do anything. So, okay, we did a concert on the roof, and people came.
Yeah.
In the garden. And she said, we have always thought so hard. How do we engage the community? How do we do something where someone comes? And then we were forced to do this, and it worked so beautifully in her great program. And she said, this is also changing us. And we all hope and think something is happening. So really thank you for sharing that. And also that, what one hears from you, that you really say, this is for the people, this is for the audiences, and the low prices, which I think is such a big problem in New York. Family, 4 kids, somewhere working class, however one would say and describe that, they can't go to a Broadway show. It would cost $1,000 if they all
Yeah.
have something. Not possible. And also,
Yeah.
$100 you have Netflix all year, and they will say no. Why? This is even there are better stories, and what it is of significance is the communities, the liveness. What are you working on at the moment? What's on your
Well,
but also personally, what are you creating? What are you doing? Elizabeth says,
something
yeah,
actually.
Elizabeth Hayes, who also it's incredible what he does at the same time. So what are you working on for the plans for the two institutions, but also personally, what are you creating?
So imminently, I'm doing something very interesting that's been kind of busting my chops. I am learning a work by a composer named Gregory Spears called 7 Days, which I'm starting to record next week. And his idea, which I think is very interesting, I guess that's why I'm doing it, is to explore what does it mean to hear music at different times of the day. So this project is meant to be audio only and virtual. It's going to be done through an app in which you will receive a work, and they range between 3 and 8 minutes or so, every morning, afternoon, and evening for 7 days. So there are 21 works, and there's about 90 minutes or so of music. And I thought it was such an interesting idea. Along of these explorations, what is art and how do we react to it? Is it different? Do we assign a different meaning to a morning piece or to an evening piece? Because of course the beauty of instrumental music is that it is abstract. And that's of course, I think, why arts are important, because it's one of the few spaces in human existence where your opinion is all that matters. Nobody can tell you what to love or not to love in music or dance or visual arts. You can make your own decisions, and then 5 years later you can change them. There's no measuring stick, and that's the beauty of it. So I've been really, and given the strangeness of how we function in pandemic times and how anything's possible, the piece was sort of finished in, I guess, in December or so. And in a regular quote unquote life, we would be talking about the premiere in 2 years from now. But here we are. I'm recording it next week, so I feel a little like, that's really soon. So I've been really working on that. I was in Atlanta last week, filming Chopin's Second Concerto with the Atlanta Symphony, and for Baryshnikov Center, we are commissioning a new group of artists, and now starting to think about residents. We are accommodating some of the residents that we had to cancel last spring, so they are now coming during the summer to develop some works in the building, and we're starting to look into the future of live performances. And at Timberrise, similarly, we have commissioned some artists, and we're continuing to film, and we're looking into 2022 for live concerts, but very much aware that this digital production will go on. And it's been very fascinating. Timberrise side is also multidisciplinary because of the sculptures, and also with very, very deep connections with poetry. So our films often have poems in them and interspersed, and so it's been really kind of wonderful in both organizations to, first of all, I feel like a Santa Claus. For starters, when pandemic hit, I couldn't be more proud of both organizations that immediately said, we will pay all the artists who were canceled, because people's income just was gone. So we paid the fees, and then immediately both Misha Baryshnikov and Peter and Kathy Halstead immediately said, what can we do now to really provide work? So it's been amazing to be a part of that, and so we're continuing with that, but also really looking forward to being together, sneezing in public, just being around. I'm ready.
Well, listen, thank you really, Pedja, for taking time out for rehearsing for this important thing. The videos you can all see on the Baryshnikov Art Center website, or?
Yes, so all of the Berkshire at bacnyc.org, everything is free, and the same as at Tip at Rise.org. There's a lot of bacnyc.org, and then tipatrise.org. And I think there might be somewhere in the links with this broadcast, but I don't, somewhere.
You can find on Apple. You just put in your name, or
you can, and YouTube and all those predictable spaces. There's some wonderful videos, actually both from Berkshire Center and Tip at Rise on YouTube and Vimeo, and on our websites. One thing that has been really interesting, because we're both small organizations, we have consistently documented all performances. So when the pandemic happened, we had this library of films that we could share. And in both cases, we've also been dedicated to encourage artists to share it, because, you know, as a performing artist, you don't own anything, and very often you can't get a video of it. So you have this history of performance with nothing to show. I mean, very little to show. So this has been a very conscious effort in both organizations to document and to encourage artists to say, this, share it, you know, post it, do whatever. So it's been wonderful to you know, go to, because, you know, often we're so busy with planning the new performances, and we are now as well, but I mean, this was such a time to really reach into those libraries and get those videos out. So it's been really wonderful to revisit some of those performances and then invite the artists to speak and create little events around them. And I would really encourage everybody to see both websites, and particularly this weekend for the Tip at Rise. We call it Tip at Rise on tour, because we're not in our location. These new films, which have been really a joy to be part of.
Amazing. That's a good reminder. Visual arts is so much better at it, but document your art and share it, you know, and all these concerns people have, this union, but no, there's something of significance, and that perhaps it's changing, and on both sides. Inside,
it is. There's and
it's quite to hear from you. It's important to say this will stay. This is not just a solution we were forced into. We couldn't. So you say, no, this is of importance. We learned something, and actually it's working. And it's this is a very big announcement in a way, and should all put us to think. Also theaters, you know, who were thinking, should we do it at all or not? And then okay, we'll do it, but only till it starts again. But there is perhaps something to discover. And I think some theaters in Germany hired digitorgs, dramaturgs, who are then responsible for digital arm or leg, however, whatever you want to call it. So something is moving, is changing, and perhaps in 50 or 100 years from now, people say, oh, it all started at that time. Who knows?
But I think the important thing to me is to say that it's in addition to and not instead of. It's definitely in addition to. We will never get tired of being with each other and experiencing performing arts at that moment and never again. Yeah. There's something so beautiful about that it's not going to happen again. So that's great.
It is great, but also something new emerged. So thank you, Pedja, for really for sharing your work with us, and we are so thankful that you came to us and that you are able to share and are willing to do so. This is of significance and of importance. So thank you so much. Next week we go on. We will have Rachel Cooper from the Asia Society, Elizabeth Hayes, formerly from FACE. She's going to Palermo, to the Bundy's Theater, and we will have artists from Indonesia, and with us from Nigeria and from Switzerland. So we will go on with our also global dialogue, and it's important to hear from you. And what you do is so important for the city, for the arts, as a symbol, as an imaginary space, but also as a real space. And we have so much respect for your center, and also Baryshnikov for putting it out there and creating it, but also you to make it happen. And there's a lot we can learn from. And this is all very, very important and serious, and it has consequences, what you say and what you did. So really thank you for sharing it to our audiences. Thank you for taking the time. As Pedja said, so much is out there. But it's a bit like it used to be the New York Times. You read a paper and then you got the information, but now we have the internet. and we are confused about all this stuff, what we could and should or should not read. And the same as with performance, it was pretty clear where you went and go, but all of a sudden is a flood of things. And but still, there are institutions and artists we really should follow and pay attention to. As someone said, we also have to pay attention what we pay attention to. So let's pay attention to these centers, to these institutions that also showed in the time of Corona that producing, creating art is of significance and who found new ways. And we're still exploring, as you said. Thank you so much, everybody. Hello in your organizations and to the audiences. Hope you will be able to tune in next week. And thanks to Hallround, our truly great host. We are so thankful to be there nationally and internationally present. Our center is closed. I can't get it in my university without basically a police officer going with me to my office. And I just got an email that also we will not be able to do live programming in the fall. Nobody even talked to me. We just got it in a mail. But this is a reality, and we also trying to do something. So it's very inspiring for us to hear. Thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.